Memory stocks are once again falling in what feels like an everyday occurrence by this point. However, it seems like the culprit this time originates from a story coming from China and how it's ramping up its productive capabilities in the memory space. So let's just find out what's happening, shall we? So as I said in the intro, it does feel like at this moment in time, memory stocks just have a couple of days where they rise and then they just fall and absolutely collapse and capitulate a few days later whenever a small bit of news can be interpreted as a bad thing for the memory trade as a whole. As a result, we are now looking at Micron was down about 2.25% by the end of the trading day. It's down another half a percentage point in after hours. Actually, at its worst point today, around an hour in trading, it was down by around 6%. SanDisk performed even worse. They were down about 11% on the day, down almost another percentage point in after hours trading. It's pretty bleak out there. Western Digital performed similarly, down 4.21%, and SK Hynix was down 7.5%. It was a bloodbath today. And the reality is that the cause of this bloodbath was just one headline, and it was this. China begins making homegrown DUV chip-making tools, the information reports. China has begun manufacturing domestically developed immersion deep ultraviolet lithography machines, a key chip-making tool long dominated by Dutch supplier ASML, the information reported on Monday. This is a big deal. The machines are expected to be delivered this year to leading Chinese chip makers, including Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corp, Huhong Semiconductor, hopefully I said that one right, and Zhangjing Memory Technologies, the report said, citing people familiar with the matter. And just for those who aren't familiar, a lithography machine looks like something like this. It's extremely technically difficult to make, and really only ASML can make them and export them. And for a very long while, there's been export controls on who they can sell those machines to. As we already know by this point, the memory trade is based upon the idea of scarcity and the fact that demand will outweigh supply for longer than people anticipate. And that means going beyond 2027. The issue here is that if China and its memory manufacturers are able to have their own and produce their own DUV machines, then that means their productive capabilities are increasing. Fortunately, the news isn't as bad as it seems. In the same article, it points out that the breakthrough could eventually challenge ASML in China, but the system still lags on performance and reliability and needs further testing before mass production. Remember, the margin of error on these things is tiny. They need to get it right, otherwise there's a lot of wastage. Production will be limited initially with about 5 DUV machines this year and roughly 20 in 2027. Immersion DUV machines, which print circuit patterns onto silicone wafers, are the most advanced lithography tools available to Chinese chipmakers after restrictions cut off access to the extreme ultraviolet lithography EUV machines. So those are the most important, those are the ones that can help create HBM or high bandwidth memory. And that's the reason why, if you didn't know, we're seeing a fall in SanDisk more than we are seeing in Micron, because ultimately Micron's future lies in high bandwidth memory, which needs those ultraviolet lithography machines. Oh, and before we continue, if you can, please give the video a like and a subscribe. It really does push this channel forwards. Also, if you can, whilst watching this video, please press the hype button. That does more than anything else. It pushes this video way more in the algorithm than anything else. So all three of those things will be greatly appreciated. Honestly, without you guys, I'm not sure I would do these videos as often as I do, so thank you so much. Let's get right back into it. And this is a big deal for all of those stocks simply because China's becoming a fiercer competitor in this space. As we would recall in my last video about the Chinese chip shortage, which does exist, I will link the video in the description, you should give it a watch after this one. There's some interesting facts about Chinese memory supply. For instance, it says that global build-out of AI data centers has transmitted the humble component into the world's most sought-after product, sparking battles over pricing and a scramble for supply. The Chinese memory makers are now picking clients and dictating prices. In some cases, they are charging more than their larger South Korean rivals, Samsung and SK Hynix, as skyrocketing demand for memory chips forces Chinese buyers to pay more than ever. And remember, China was considered at one point to be the glut of supply that could alleviate some of the pricing pressure some companies like Apple were facing. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. And to that point, the article goes on to say that the Chinese company's grip on chip supply is putting them on a collision course with Washington. The Pentagon has designated both firms as Chinese military companies for what it says is their role in aiding Chinese military civil fusion strategy, a charge they deny. YMTC is already on the US entity list, a designation that has restricted its access to US origin supplies. Micron, the Chinese firm's main Western competitor, has pushed US lawmakers to enact further restrictions on CXMT and YMTC, including curbing their access to chip-making equipment. So Micron obviously want to limit their competition as much as they can. But gaining access to the new lithography machines isn't the only thing that these Chinese chip-making companies are doing. They're actually expanding enormously in a very short period of time. Only today, funny enough, the chipmaker CXMT, the Chinese Zhejiang technology company, actually listed and surged 466% on their IPO day, which was crazy. And that IPO managed to raise them about $8.6 billion, which is enough money for them to continue to expand in this market. Interestingly enough, CXMT is building 2 new plants in Shanghai and Hefei as it talks with local authorities elsewhere about a third, according to 3 sources. Those projects would more than double production capacity to more than 600,000 wafers per month. If it all goes to plan, CXMT's capacity would then overtake Micron by 2030. Big plans ahead. Meanwhile, the Chinese chipmaker YMTC, who produces NAND memory, is also planning to produce and create more factories amid heightened US-Sino trade relation tensions. Chinese chipmaker Yangtze Memory Technologies, or YMTC, aims to build 2 more factories in addition to one that has been completed this year, which will more than double its production capacity when all 3 are up and running, people familiar with the matter have said. So they're clearly out there trying to increase supply as much as they possibly can. What's worth remembering though is doubling capacity doesn't necessarily mean that that is actually the amount of wafers that are produced. As we have said, you need the correct equipment to have the precision in order to produce these PCBs and these chips. If you don't have good enough equipment and the lithography machines that you've created yourself aren't as good as the ones you could have bought from ASML, if you could have, well then you're going to have a lot of wastage, and your capacity of 600,000 chips, well that might not be possible. And what's worth remembering here is that the stock market as a whole, when it comes to the sort of memory plays, are just extremely volatile now. Anytime there is the slightest bit of news about capacity or about a new technology that can make memory more efficient, the memory stocks just completely sell off. Everybody now is absolutely frightened that something is going to make this stock collapse. And truthfully, it's been quite bad. The last month, SanDisk is down 41%. Micron in the last month is down 20%. I can't even say SK Hynix, but let's say SK Hynix is down from its highs of 15%. Or actually, it might be even more than that. So ultimately, all we're seeing now is just complete fear. And it does make sense when you think about it. If you think memory is a cyclical stock, which it pretty much is if you assume old accounts of memory demand are true, well, there will be a peak when demand is more than supply. And then from that point on, demand will stay the same, but supply will creep upwards. Tells you that maybe we have hit that point. And it's funny that this all happened today because this story came out, as I'm pretty sure you're aware of, which is that Nvidia and OpenAI are in talks to basically allow Nvidia to backstop an agreement for OpenAI to take over a 10 gigawatt data center facility. And in that facility, they'll need about $350 billion worth of Nvidia chips. And with those chips, they'll need a heck of a lot of memory than they have today. So there's an enormous increase in demand coming, yet that wasn't good enough to send memory stocks higher. So that says a lot about where we are in the memory cycle and the memory trade today. Let's watch this video about CXMT's IPO because I think it's quite interesting.
Changxin Memory Technology, or CXMT, one of the crown jewels of China's high-tech industry, debuts in Shanghai's Nasdaq-style star market in what is the 2nd biggest IPO ever in China. 10 years ago, the Hefei government made a big bet on the firm when private investors shunned it. Taking on giants like South Korea's Samsung and SK Hynix seemed like a risky bet then. Founder Zhu Yiming set his sights on standard memory chips called DRAM, the silicon essential for computers to process data. After years of losses, the company finally logged historic returns, pointing to a net income increase of more than 2,200% in the first half of this year. Driving that windfall is the glut in data center demand that's pushed up chip prices several times over. Competitors slashed DRAM production and shifted to build more lucrative high-bandwidth memory, or HBM chips. CXMT swooped right into that supply gap, even prompting bellwethers like Apple to consider buying its chips.
Initially, the Chinese were the kind of low-end, cheaper product producer, but over the last 20 years, they've shown in so many industries that they can really move up and become competitive forces.
CXMT is
and to be honest, I'm going to just quickly point out here is that Don't ever expect that China or the Chinese manufacturers, which, by the way, they're going to feel a lot of pressure, and they do feel a lot of pressure by the Chinese government to produce and prioritize domestic demand first. Don't ever expect them to have a product at the moment that's significantly cheaper than their competitors. They'll only do that when it's strategically important for them to do that. At the moment, that's probably not the case. They've still got a lot of expanding to do, and they can take advantage of an enormous amount of margin at the expense of American businesses.
Cornerstone of President Xi's self-sufficiency push, and nowhere is this clearer than here at the World AI Conference in Shanghai, where China's latest tech is on full display. Some are calling this a watershed moment, the emergence of a homegrown chip champion relying on local suppliers, local data servers to test and refine its products.
And that's it really. I think this story, basically the story that bad news or sort of bad news causes an enormous sell-off, is becoming a bit of a pattern now in the memory trade, and it's becoming extremely frustrating for everybody involved. Just watching it from afar, I'm getting annoyed because sometimes the fundamentals just completely differ from the reality, or the noise is different from the signal. And well, what can you expect? Anyway, as I always say, please make sure to give this video a like and subscribe, and if you can and you are able to, please give the video a hype, because that allows this video to get more reach. Also, thank you very much for watching. I do really appreciate it. I've been building this channel slowly, but without you guys, I wouldn't be able to do this as often, because simply put, I put a lot of effort into this to try and understand where these things are going and where things are moving. And, you know, your support and your comments really do push me forward. So anyway, thank you guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye for now.